Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show US Men's National Team roster special. My name is Daryl Grove and I'm joined by the man they call Tay-Tay. His name is Tay-Tay.
Oh boy.
Hello.
Oh, it's just Tay-Tay now.
Tay-Tay.
Oh, Ryan Bailey.
Yes.
You are the worst.
I have been enjoying the weekend review shows with Tay-Tay.
As have I.
And Rai. Baby?
I think it didn't stand out to me as much. We had a few tweets about how many times you called me Tay-Tay on Monday's show.
Yeah.
I think
you know I see our tweets, right?
I know. But I'm telling the listener.
Oh,
but
excuse
I think
me.
It didn't stand out to me because after our game on Sunday night, our outdoor game, I went and had like family dinner with my wife's side of the family where there are lots of nieces and nephews or like little nieces and nephews. All of whom
din-din.
call me Uncle Tay-Tay.
Oh, do they?
So,
Yes.
or Uncle Tay is the shortened one. But so I think it was just more like, that's what I'm called. And so when Ryan was doing it, it didn't really register. That said, I did try to keep track of how many times he did it and lost track pretty quickly.
You do have a Tay-Tay count.
Yeah.
A Tay-Tay-ometer.
I'm going to have to find out what his nickname is that he doesn't necessarily care for.
Yeah, you need to find his childhood friends. I'm assuming he has some because he's a charming man.
I don't know. I mean, he is living in North Carolina and he does have an English accent. So maybe he was driven out. That could be.
He was banished.
Yes.
All right.
Banished.
Yeah. We're not here to talk about Ryan Bailey.
We're not.
We are here to talk US Men's National Team roster.
We are.
It dropped, maybe an hour ago? We are in studio to watch Champions League, but this happened, so we're doing a roster reaction show.
We are, and I have to say I'm happy it happened, not just because we have the roster to discuss and we know who's going to be on it, but because we didn't realize that English and European clocks have not moved forward, so we were expecting kickoff at 3, kickoff is at 4, so we had an extra hour to kill, so that makes it even better that we can record.
I should have known. I mean, I've been dealing with the time difference back home, where it's an hour different.
Yeah.
I should have thought, also the soccer happens.
It always happens. It happens every year. And it used to be less of a big deal when it was 2:45 to 3:45. Somehow that doesn't feel like nearly as big of a difference as 3 to 4. But I remember getting off work early to get home to be excitedly turn on the TV. And then it was another hour of fishing or whatever it used to be.
Fishing?
Yeah.
No fishing today.
No fishing today.
Okay, roster reaction.
Let's do it.
Gregg Berhalter has named 24 players for the upcoming US friendlies against Ecuador, March 21st, Chile, March 26th. It is a mix of the guys that were in January camp and some names, the big names from Europe. But from what I've seen, people are not happy with this roster.
Yeah.
Let's start there then.
If it were a movie, Rotten Tomatoes would say it was mixed to negative critical reviews.
Why are people not happy?
Here is
Is it that Holmes and Watson movie that Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly made?
No. That looked like it was going to be bad from the very beginning, I have to say. No, I think it's for me.
That would just be if Gregg Berhalter had listed Omar Gonzalez's name 24 times.
Yeah, pretty much. But then said, it's totally going to work and be hilarious. And it's worked in the past, ? I think this is kind of an abstract answer, but the best way I can put it is that it seems like the U.S. roster should look better. And I really think that's what it comes down to for me, is that when you look at that January roster, we discussed it, you're not bringing European players, you're not bringing anybody who's in season, you're bringing in MLS players or lower league players in the past or what have you who aren't doing anything else. So then you think of that January camp and then it's like, but in March, and we've even had times when the March friendlies were all European players.
Yep.
And so I think when you get that in your head and you expect it to be, then these March friendlies, that's going to be that full tier, next level roster.
Yeah, here's our best.
And when you look at it, there's not that many obvious European players when you look at it, aside from some of the big midfielders, but moving into the attack, there's not that much there, and there are reasons why some players aren't called in.
So is this why people aren't happy? Is because the attack basically looks really similar to the attack that was selected for the January camp? The only difference I would say is that Jeremy Abubisi is replaced by Jordan Morris.
Yeah.
That's basically it, right? It's still Ariola, Baird, Zardes, Ramirez, and Jonathan
Exactly.
Lewis.
Yeah. And I do think that there are some people who were left out. We're going to talk about why. I think there are reasons to be frustrated about some of the selections and some of the people who were omitted. But I think overall, you expect the March roster to look better because it seems like it should.
Are we focusing too much on the forwards, though? Because Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, Christian Pulisic is there. What if... so there's a reason Christian Pulisic is not listed among the forwards.
Keep listing,
listed among the midfielders.
See, I guess my response to that is keep listing, because you go to the center backs, you could say
Miazga,
Brooks, Yedlin.
Yedlin, yeah.
That's it. I mean, really, like you've
in terms
got
of big name Europeans.
yeah, like really, and even then, like I think, like Miazga, we're talking about an English Championship player at the moment who we have some questions about because of the way it went for him in France. So, like, and not to disparage him, but just to say that it's not the way it used to be, where that European-based squad or European-based contingent was, you know, guys who were starting, like a couple people starting in the Champions League, a couple people playing in the Premier League, a couple people in the Bundesliga, one in Serie A. Like you had,
McKennie might play in the Champions League today.
This is true.
Tyler Adams might next season.
Well, Pulisic won't anymore. Yeah. But I guess my point is simply that it used to be a deeper European roster and a seemingly deeper American roster, or domestic roster. So when you combine them, suddenly it looked like this super, super duper strong team. Yeah. Whereas I don't think there is as many players as we might have expected. We didn't really have a running order for all the things we're going to talk about. There's a lot of things to talk about here. But I think people would have been a lot happier with this roster if Josh Sargent was on it and if Timothy Weah was on it, because these are young players people love. They've performed for the national team during the Dave Sarachan era. Not every time guaranteed, but, you know, Sargent got himself a couple of goals. Tim Weah had some really good appearances where he had some nice combinations and sometimes looked the most dangerous player. So can we address that first? Because I would say what's happened is this is about the underage teams. We can, with the caveat that I think recording-wise, we're like 6 minutes in at this point. I would just say, listen to the whole show, if you're listening, before you send us your tweets. Because I can already picture people writing in to say, like, you didn't even mention Bobby Wood. Bobby Wood's a European player who should be on there. And like, we're going to get to Bobby Wood. Don't worry, we're going to try to talk about everything we possibly can. Then send us your angry tweets if they still exist. And make sure they go to, what's Adam Snavely's Twitter account?
It might be just at Snaves.
Okay, send it to Staves. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, but people would be happy if Timothy Weah, Josh Sargent were on this roster. From what I've read from the Gregg Berhalter quotes from the conference call and just from common sense, it's not necessarily because they're not starting for Bremen and Celtic. It's because there's also going to be a U20 roster and camp and a U23 roster and possibly even some U23 friendlies. U23 being important because Olympic qualifying is coming. We've failed the last 2 times. We want to get it right this time. Right? So we can maybe dig in more into that later. But if Weah and Sargent weren't necessarily going to start, they might end up on that roster, and you'll feel much better about the U23 roster when you see those names on it this time round.
I mean, and then that extends to Georgi Mihailovic, also eligible for that squad. Jeremy Abobase, as you've said, Reggie Cannon.
Abobase's 22. I'm pretty sure he just makes the cut.
I think so too, and then Reggie Cannon, I think as well.
20,
so all 5 of those players then maybe could have been on this roster, but maybe Gregg Berhalter's looking at them as U20, U23, and maybe
I'd say U23 for everybody we just mentioned.
So then you want to get them some more opportunities, some more minutes at that level to compete so that you then don't miss out on the Olympics. But also then you're not sort of bringing in Timothy Weah to maybe sit the bench for 2 games. Or maybe you bring in Timothy Weah, but then you don't bring in Jonathan Lewis, who did impress in the January friendlies. So I think you kind of have to work on that math as well if you're Gregg Berhalter.
Okay. Do you want to talk Bobby Wood now, since we're talking strikers?
Sure, because he is one of 2 or 3 players that I do have a hard time sort of understanding why they're not on this roster.
I would call them major omissions.
Yes, and Bobby Wood is the big one that, like, when we talked it out, a lot of the omissions I think you can, not saying like justify, but I think you can explain away that there are reasons for why people were called or weren't called.
Yeah, like Bobby we just did with Weah and Sargent, right? There's probably a good long-term reason. It doesn't mean like Berhalter doesn't like them. It means there's another thing going on.
Yeah, but Bobby Wood, I have question mark next to for why he wasn't included, and I think that.
Do you know the last time he scored for Hanover? I looked this up.
I'm going to say question mark as well.
November 25th.
Yeah,
possibly before Thanksgiving. I don't know when Thanksgiving was.
Don't know either, but it's around there. It's around there, which is not good. I mean, and I think maybe that is just the explanation right there, that he's not in form. That said, in the past, we've seen national team managers on occasion bring that type of player in to maybe try to give them some confidence, to remind them that they're in consideration, to maybe possibly potentially put them in the shot window and say, hey, here's a guy who maybe he's not scoring at club level, but he's a national team player and he's a veteran. So to not see him included, and I shouldn't say at the expense of, but meanwhile we have, like, in our depth chart that we have up on the board, it looks like it's Chassis Zardes and Christian Ramirez as your central forwards.
Basically the same as in January, right?
And looking for a forward who, from what we saw in January, it's a lot of movement all over the place to try to create overloads or create gaps or create opportunities for other players, but, you know, obviously get some for themselves. That does feel like a role that Bobby Wood would have done very well in.
I would agree with that, I think it might suit Bobby Wood, the centre-forward role, but maybe not an out-of-form Bobby Wood.
And so, I mean, that's the question.
Berhalter went to Europe, watched a bunch of players. If he didn't see anything of Bobby Wood because he wasn't playing, or saw unimpressive things from Bobby Wood, then maybe that makes the decision easier.
And this is where, true, but this is where speculation comes into play as well, because there is also I mean, I have to believe that maybe they would have mentioned this, but even it could be just as simple as Bobby Wood said, look, or Gregg Berhalter said, look, you're in my plans, don't worry about it. And Bobby Wood said, okay, well then I want to focus on club right now. I need to get my form back up. I want to stay here for the international break and train with the senior team.
Yep.
That's a distinct possibility. I would find it hard to believe, but it is a possibility. And so maybe that's part of it, but I think what it comes down to it is that maybe Bobby Wood, given his current form, maybe there's like more issues because of that lack of form. So Gregg Berhalter went with what he kind of feels like is already familiar and players who know the system already.
Fair enough, yeah. Josie Altidore, not really back from injury yet, hasn't played for Toronto yet this season. My understanding is that Berhalter likes him. Josie Altidore was called into January camp just to come and shake hands and see some of what's going on and be in and around it.
Jordan Morris too, right?
Jordan Morris too, yeah. Those were the two basically not quite fit players that were called into January camp just as a symbol of, hey, you're in our thoughts, right? Yeah. So Altidore is not, this doesn't mean Berhalter dislikes Altidore. This means Altidore is not fit enough, not ready to go. Yeah.
Yeah, and so...
Which is fine, right?
Yeah, rounding out the forward depth, because we've already talked about Sargent and Bobasay to some extent, that leaves Andrija Novakovic, who I guess...
Not selected, to be clear.
Not selected, and I think that one maybe is the first example of style not fitting the player, because we saw him. I do, because we didn't see him in January, but we've seen him get like calls in and then not get as many minutes as we would have expected. And maybe if you're going like the Christian Ramirez route, then Novakovic makes more sense, because he is that big, tall striker who can kind of win, like challenge in the air, but can also play with the ball at his feet. But I don't know if he's as mobile as maybe Gregg Berhalter is looking for from a starting striker.
Yeah.
And then he's got Christian Ramirez who can come in. I'm not trying to say Christian Ramirez is better than Novakovic, but I think that is probably the justification of maybe Novakovic doesn't fit exactly what Gregg Berhalter wants him to do.
Novakovic may also be Olympics eligible.
That's possible. I'm not sure how old he is.
I don't know. I wish I knew.
I don't think he. I'm trying to think, because he was not.
All right, we're gonna live Google this.
He was not released from Reading for the U20 World Cup, whenever the last U20 World Cup is, because
2017.
That was one of the few players who wasn't let go. So he is right around that cutoff point.
He's 22, born in September. So same as Bobasay.
Yeah, so it's
possibility.
It's possible. It's possible.
Right.
So, but I think that's maybe one where Berhalter, because the idea of this roster is that he's coming out of it basically knowing who he wants to pick for the Gold Cup, right? He wants to figure out his strongest possible team.
It's working towards that, yeah.
Yeah, so if you look at this
he's
roster...
talked about this being a chance to evaluate players, and by the end of this, we'll have a really good idea of who we want for the Gold Cup.
Yeah, and so, like, I think this is like my secondary thesis, aside from like the roster maybe looks about as good as it can, but seems like it should look better. My second kind of takeaway from this is that if you look at this from a logical growth perspective, these selections make more sense. Because, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that's my theory too, is that this is growth from January, and the reason he's included so many of the players from I want to say there's 14 of the players from January make this 24-man roster, so they are in the majority. Yeah. It's like the best of the January camp plus the best of our European-based players like Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, Christian Pulisic, the centre-backs, and so on. And as I understand it, sorry, I feel like I've taken this over, but I was just really excited to say it. I think the theme of this is the big-name guys that I just listed can come in, and we won't be starting fresh, and Gregg Berhalter has to like write the stuff on the whiteboard all over again and do the same drills, and it's fresh for everybody all over again, and learn the system, the shape, because we think we're going to play the same 4-3-3 with the right back that comes into centre midfield and makes it a 3-2-4-1. We don't have to start from scratch, right? There's a base of knowledge and understanding, and you can just plug the new, better guys in to the pre-existing thing. And I think that might be the best way to do it if Gregg Berhalter's all about establishing his system.
Yes, and so let's stick there for a moment, and then let's avoid like one possible outlier when it comes to right back. But to your point, you have Nick Lima. He's included because we know he can do that job. We saw him do it for the national team in January. The question then is that a job that DeAndre Yedlin can also do?
Yep.
Do we want him to do that role? Is that a thing Gregg Berhalter wants? So there's a chance we see Yedlin attempt to do the Nick Lima thing. People get really mad when we call it the Nick Lima role as though it's his, but it's just shorthand for right back becoming central midfielder.
Yeah.
So I'm going to call that the Lima role.
Yeah.
So like there's an argument that maybe Berhalter wants to see if Yedlin can do that. There's an argument that maybe he wants to see like, okay, Lima can do that when we need that. Yedlin can be our kind of attacking right back when we need that.
Yeah, when we just do a straight up overlapping right back who doesn't come into the middle, but just it's about overlapping down the outside like Harrison Afful used to do.
And so then if you look at it from that perspective, then not including Reggie Cannon makes sense. It's disappointing because you like to see young players included. Same thing for Shaq Moore. But if they're not going to get minutes and you want to see if Yedlin can do it, and then you have the other guy who you know can do it, then that's enough. And that's kind of where you are. This is the wrinkle that I was trying to avoid, is that there's maybe a third name that could also be playing as a right back / central midfielder.
There was speculation in January that right back centre mid role is tailor-made for Tyler Adams. Right? So Tyler Adams is on this roster. He's listed as a midfielder, but there's a good chance we see him in that right back centre mid role because it would be absolutely perfect.
I genuinely, looking at the roster as we have it, as we've kind of constructed it and broken it down on the board up here, I don't see how he doesn't play there. It's to that level for me. Like, I mean, if they go with the shape that you've discussed, the 4-3-3 that's like becomes a 3-1-4-1 or whatever it is, I think
3-2-4-1.
3-2-4-1. Thank you.
Because the right back goes and sits alongside the defensive midfielder, the Bradley or the Trapp.
If they do that again, then you're looking at it's probably Bradley or Trapp as that number 6. Then it sounds like it's going to be Pulisic as the kind of dedicated number 10 on the left side.
We'll talk about him in a bit, but yes.
All right, but if that's the case, then there's kind of one midfield spot for Weston McKennie or Tyler Adams, and I don't see how if you're Gregg Berhalter, you don't have both of them starting. I don't see how you sit Tyler Adams because Weston McKennie's good and so is Christian Pulisic. I think if you want your strongest team possible, I think Tyler Adams plays right back / center mid, and I will be fascinated to see who starts there over the course of both legs or who gets the most minutes there over the course of both legs.
Okay. Do you want to talk about guys missing out still?
All I wanted to say was that, but I think to bring it like full circle, and then I'm sure we'll reference it a couple more times, it is the case for me that a lot of these roles, is Gyasi Zardes our best striker? I don't think so. I think that there are other options there. We've explained why some, like Josh Sargent out there and Josie Altidore. But I think if you're Gregg Berhalter, Zardes did a lot of what you wanted him to do, a lot of the job he was asked to do in January. Now maybe you want to see, hey, if we put this piece around you or this piece around you, or you have a little bit more experience, does that translate from good off-the-ball movement to goals? And maybe if Zardes scores a couple goals in these friendlies, then he moves up the ladder and really cements that
scored a couple
status.
in MLS.
Yeah.
I actually don't know how many he's got, but I know he scored in Major League Soccer this season.
Yeah, and if he doesn't, then maybe that's the answer too. And I guess that's what I sort of appreciate about this roster. I think there are reasons to be frustrated, and I understand why people are kind of down on it.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like we can see progression. We can see where we're going. That Zardes, if he does well, he continues on. If not, then he drops off. We bring in somebody else.
Here's what I like. Because Gregg Berhalter has laid the foundation of his system for us to look at against Panama and Costa Rica, and because he's kind of been really good with his quotes today, saying that we're continuing to develop and sort of build on what happened in January, and that's kind of the point of this camp. We kind of know, I didn't think this would be the case. I think we know the system that the US is going to play, and we can then logically know why certain players are in or they're out. Yeah. And I think it's a thing we haven't been able to do with the US for a long time because we sort of didn't know what the plan was. We didn't know what was going to be happening. One really good example I want to give is Anthony Robinson.
Sure.
So Anthony Robinson is a guy that we were excited about. Scuffed are excited about. Adam Bell's really excited about him. Had some great moments for the US men's national team, but he is a left back whose core strength is overlap, beat a guy, get across it.
Yeah.
Right? He's not a left back whose core strength is have good defensive positioning, help us build out of the back. If you look at this roster, one, Anthony Robinson is not on it. Two, the guys that are on it are Daniel Lovitz, who we know can do that role where you're the left back, who when the ball goes forward, formation shifts, and the left back essentially becomes left centre back. Your job is not to get forward and overlap at all, right? So it's Daniel Lovitz. Tim Ream can maybe do that job. Aaron Long can maybe do that job. Those are the only guys on the roster that are potential left backs.
Yeah, and worth noting there, Greg Garza not included, but is, I think, still injured or is only getting limited minutes at this point.
But even if he was, I would guess he's not on this roster because he doesn't fit that role the same way.
He was in the January one and had to be pulled out.
He?
So
that's
I think that factors. The one that I realized we didn't have on our list of omissions, so I wouldn't have been surprised to see Greg Garza, if he were fully fit, get one more chance to see what he can do. Jorge Villafana, with that in mind, does make it's more confusing to me. Because he does feel to me like a more proven left back who can also attack. But
I would say his key is attacking and his defending is not that good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess I wouldn't have minded
Remember
seeing
the
a
Trinidad,
couple of the names there.
One of the Trinidad goals, October 2017.
I've had that professionally removed from my brain.
Villafaña's defending was not stellar on that. He is not known for his defensive work first. He's known for his contributions to the attack.
That just reminded me of a player we have to talk about
Yes.
at some point. But I don't want to talk about him yet because
I just want to make my bigger point that like this is a system first roster, and guys like Robinson, it makes sense why he's not there.
And I think we've really driven this point home already. But just to make sure it's really driven home, the last thing I wanted to add though is like
a Fuji steak, we'll hammer it into the ground.
Forgive me for what I'm about to do. Also, I forgive you for that. But do you remember the first Goal movie?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember when like is it Santiago?
Yeah.
I think he like goes to his first training session.
It's the Miguel Almiron story, kind of.
There we go. But do you remember in the first training session, like it's raining and the coach looks away and doesn't see him do like the bicycle kick or pull off the Rabona or the bit of skill.
Yeah.
And then he turns back around and like he's missed that like one moment.
Yeah.
And while that is a ludicrous example of how things work,
yeah,
it is a good reminder.
Film your sessions, people.
Exactly. It is a good reminder though that like it is a FIFA video game TV show sort of thing of, oh yeah, like this guy played one game, now let me play a different player this game and see who looks better. Like you can't really do that. You have to give them a couple games to see, can they adjust, can they adapt? Okay, this didn't work in the first game, now I want you to try this in the second game. Does that player then respond? And I think again, just for people who are thinking like, but we know what Zardes can do, we know what Ramirez can do, why not try other people there? I think it's because Berhalter says, well, I don't really know what they can do for sure. I want to see them in this situation with this person around them, and then this time if it doesn't work, there's a larger sample size that now you know a little bit more than you did before.
I slightly disagree. I would agree on Ramirez in that like he can prove stuff, but I would say with Zardes, Berhalter knows him inside out, and that's maybe even the reason he's there, is that he trusts Zardes to perform the centre-forward role in the way that he did against Panama and Costa Rica, which genuinely, if you look back, were mostly really good performances with just some horrible finishing. Peppered in there, but at least now we have like when he puts his full strength midfield out there, he knows that ahead of them is not going to be a guy learning to play Gregg Berhalter centre forward for the first time in Bobby Wood. It's a guy who at the very least is going to be making the correct runs, the correct movements to unsettle opposition and open up space and make space for the wingers to come inside and all that. So Zardes is almost like the control in many ways.
I see what you're saying. This is an age-old disagreement that you and I have had.
Yeah.
Like, you just talked about the center forward as having a good game, and then you're like, yeah, sure, his finishing was atrocious.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's a huge part of being a center forward.
It is.
And so to me...
and that's the long-term challenge, obviously. But
well, see, I don't think it is. I think it's the this-term challenge. That's one thing I'm going to be fascinated by this March, is if Zardes goes in and does all that great running again, but then misses a sitter and misses another chance and fails to shoot when he maybe should have shot... I think I am a little bit more okay with saying, like, okay, I understand why he wanted to stick with Zardes. I understand why he wanted to give him these minutes. Now it becomes less defensible the next time around if it doesn't go well.
I mean, it's like it's a piece of the machine that works, right?
Yeah.
In terms of like all the cogs move smoothly because Zardes is doing, aside from the finishing, all the good movement and making everything else, allowing everything else to work around him, right? But you maybe if you want to go with this analogy, Berhalter's looking at that cog being like, all right, that's looking okay, but this new cog's been invented by this new company that does the same thing but way, way better, and I'm eventually going to replace you with that cog. And that cog could be Josh Sargent or Josie Altidore or whatever.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm with you. I'm with you on that one.
But maybe I'll keep an eye on that cog. If that cog suddenly starts just like, maybe I'll polish it up and it starts performing as well as a new cog.
I don't even know what a cog is anymore. You've said it so many times.
Well, it's a thing with the notches
please
in it.
describe it. I'm so excited for your engineering brain to
so
do
that
this.
it can move round and round and help other things move round and round.
Yes.
It's actually a pretty apt analogy.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate your analogy. I appreciate that we should probably move on to talk about a few other players. But before we do that, I also appreciate that we have a sponsor on today's episode.
Yeah, we do.
It's our old pals over at SeatGeek.
SeatGeek, and this is a very germane ad read because SeatGeek might be...
Jermaine Jones just signed for Ottawa, I think it is. Is that what you mean?
That's not the reason.
Oh, okay.
This might be a sponsor you want to use in conjunction with these games.
You could.
Yes.
You could do so because March 21st, Ecuador at Orlando City Stadium. Tickets available on SeatGeek. March 26th against Chile at BBVA Compass Stadium in Houston. Tickets available on SeatGeek.
So it's very easy, right? Because buying tickets used to be complicated. It used to be confusing. You didn't know where to go, where the best deal was. If you go to SeatGeek, you open the app, easily find these games, right? You literally did it before we started recording, and I think it took you about 7 seconds. I mean, you are an expert, but I think other people could match you. Time yourself. How quick can you find these games? And SeatGeek will give you a list of the ticket prices, where the seats are they green, orange, red? It'll tell you this is a good deal, this is a so-so deal. Maybe don't buy this one. I do love that SeatGeek lists some tickets and is like, maybe don't buy this one unless you've got loads and loads of money. You know
Maybe don't.
Yeah,
maybe
no,
don't.
but it's a good system, right? And so what SeatGeek is doing, it is pulling in all the various ticket options online, aggregating them all in one place, all in one app. Thank you, SeatGeek, for doing that.
That I very much appreciate as well, because then you get, as you said, you can get the confidence of knowing that you're getting a good quality ticket. But you can also use
a real ticket. There's no SeatGeek is it's real, it's legit. There is no way you're getting turned away with a SeatGeek ticket.
But you can also use it to get into events where you would otherwise be turned away. Say they're sold out. For example, I believe Minnesota has sold out like all of their ticket packages for the
new stadium,
for their Gold Cup opener, or for the second game of the Gold Cup. I think it is. I already made that mistake on an
for when they
show.
host the Gold Cup game.
Yeah, but there are tickets available on SeatGeek, and you have the color-coded system. So you can know, yes, I know these tickets are rare, but they're not worth spending this amount of money because it's got a red color, like it's colored red, versus green means, go ahead and spend that money. Then you get to experience history.
And if you would like to go to these US games or to go to the Minnesota-based games, you can do so for $10 less than the listed price.
It's actually $10 fewer.
Is it though?
No, it's not. It's definitely not. I don't think it's. I was just joking. I just like miscorrecting with fewer from now on.
Lovely.
Yes.
For $10 off.
Less.
Go to open the SeatGeek app.
Yeah.
Ignore Taylor Rockwell.
Yeah. Always a good idea.
Click the settings tab, enter the promo code TSS, and you will get a $10 discount off your first ticket purchase.
That's promo code TSS for $10 off or fewer or less than your first SeatGeek purchase. And thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's episode. Remember, everybody, SeatGeek, life's an event. We have the tickets.
Even if we don't always have the grammar.
All right.
Yeah. Where were we before we talked?
We had talked a lot about the forward line, and yet not really talked about the forward line all that much at the same time. If that makes any sense,
yes,
we briefly mentioned, who might be out wide.
Yes, the wide guys are really important in this Berhalter system, right? They are charged with getting wide left, getting wide right, stretching that defense out so that they can sort of never get too compact. Then they're like charged with then running at fullbacks, making some sneaky interior runs, maybe to get in the box and get alongside Zardes or Ramirez, but also just dribbling at people as well, right?
Yep.
And the guys that we've got listed are Paul Arriola, Corey Baird, Jordan Morris, Jonathan Lewis.
Yep.
Yeah.
And again, not as exciting if you haven't been paying attention to the national team or you're not an MLS fan. You think, who are these guys? Why aren't we calling in our A team? But again, if you look at it from the Berhalter perspective of what's already happened and where these guys are, it makes more sense because Corey Baird played both games, I think, in the January friendlies. Got an assist in there.
He was weirdly unimpressive but effective. How about that?
Yes, but still gets the assist for
Mihailovic's goal.
Goal.
First goal of the Berhalter era is that Corey Baird, really smart, clever, quick, one-time cutback that went between defenders to find Mihailovic.
Yep.
He had a lot of dribbling at people and not getting very far with it. That one move didn't work, but he spread the field. He stretched the field. Again, this is maybe a more easily observable version of the Zardes thing. He performed the role in terms of the positional play and how it unbalances the opposition. That's why Corey Baird is valuable to Gregg Berhalter.
Yeah, but run through that list. Paul Arriola comes in, gets a goal against Costa Rica, very well taken. It's like that little chipped goal off the through ball from Sebastian Lletget.
And strong start to the season with DC.
Exactly. Yeah. Jonathan Lewis, 2 assists, one against Panama, one against Costa Rica, both off the bench. So again, you want to reward him. He is starting to get minutes for NYCFC, so why not then keep him in there and see what he can do? Because again, he's familiar with the system and has already executed within it. Jordan Morris, as you said, called into that January camp. He was included along with Josie Altidore as like a shake hands, say hello, but has hit the ground running.
Right foot, left foot. He scored a goal with his left foot.
There we go. Is back to full fitness. I have said my piece about Jordan Morris on the show before. I look forward to him proving me wrong with the national team.
You could claim you just reverse jinx this into getting Jordan Morris back in the national team picture.
I could, but then if I do that, it will be very obvious that I'm lying. Because I have no real affiliation to Seattle or Jordan Morris. So yeah, I can't claim that one, unfortunately.
Jordan Morris is a striker, right?
Yep.
But I can't help thinking in my head that because we've already got Zardes and Ramirez, and because there are only 3 other wingers...
And because he plays wide for Seattle.
And because he plays wide for Seattle, I think we see him play wide in this system. And it could really work out, right? If he manages to do the Corey Baird stuff and knowing positionally what you're supposed to do to help stretch the opposition, and he can time those runs to the inside really quickly, I mean, really well, his pace will be great about bursting behind a back line, and I think it could really work out.
I think it could too, and I think that's what it comes down to for me is I am not saying that Jordan Morris is going to start on the left and score a hat trick and he's going to be amazing and trust us, like this is all going to make sense. I see the logic, and that is a big step up from national teams, U.S. national teams of the past, where we're sort of looking at it and trying to figure out who's going to go where and why are they there. To be able to kind of clearly say this is probably where he's going to be on one of like the two wings attacking is our best bet if they stick with the system they used in January. If he's there, we can evaluate him, and if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, then again, we can kind of have a little bit more sample size.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's just that it's a logical step in a progressive direction as opposed to like, oh, we're going to play 4-4-2 empty bucket, and these are the people who fit in there, and this guy already has 150 caps, and so does this guy and this guy and this guy. Then that's less exciting to me.
I would have taken that over the last few years. That would have been some nice stability, right?
I suppose.
Okay, are you ready to talk midfield? I feel like we've concentrated a lot on the strikers.
We have.
30 minutes into the show.
Yeah.
We haven't really talked about Christian Pulisic.
This is what happens when we have an extra hour. We just pack it on.
We just chat up the US men's national team.
Why not?
It's fine. All right, so Pulisic, listed as a midfielder.
Yep.
I have seen, not in a published article, and I apologise because I don't know who wrote this, but somebody transcribed the conference call, and apparently Gregg Berhalter mentioned that Christian Pulisic would play, or his best position is the sort of left-sided attacking midfielder, which again is like essentially the Mihailovic role from January, right? So it's a 6 and 2/10s kind of, or maybe a 6 and 2/8s really. But it's essentially Pulisic through the middle, not as a raw number 10, but as like the interior left channel attacking midfielder.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see this.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah?
And I think because it's not a 4-2-3-1 with Pulisic central as a number 10, and hopefully he does stuff, it is a more supported and like evolved system in my mind where you've got a hybrid 8/10 and a hybrid right back / central midfielder. It gives you more options in spaces where you need more options so that it's not just one or two players trying to create everything.
I've just realised something as well. In the Gregg Berhalter system, I think we're correctly assuming the same shape as against Panama and Costa Rica. In our defensive shape, our defensive shape is essentially a 4-4-2.
Yeah.
I would argue.
Yeah.
And if you remember, it was against Panama and Costa Rica, when we dropped into the 4-4-2, the wingers would come back, right? So like Baird and Areola or Baird and Bobsey would come back in the 4-4-2 and be left and right. The two farthest forward defensive players were the striker, Jassi Zardes, and Georgi Mihailovic. So in our defensive shape, it's actually going to be Pulisic next to a striker up front, which I think is a really interesting way to look at it, because then he's not tasked with playing centre midfield in a defensive shape.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And I also get the logic of Pulisic playing there, because what we've been talking about, Bradley and Trapp, those are our best candidates for number 6, at least right now, given where people are playing and how their form is. Like looking at like Keaton Parks and Weston McKennie. Weston McKennie has played as a 6, has played as a right back and a number 10 and a number 9, but it makes more sense to use him, I think, in the role that we saw Christian Roldan used in January.
Yeah.
So I have Weston McKennie with Roldan maybe subbing underneath him. I have Christian Pulisic with Sebastian Lletget possibly subbing in for him because it just feels like that's the logical placement for them.
And so just to really like nail that down, it's like the two attacking midfielders, Pulisic on the left, McKennie on the right, with Bradley or Trapp sitting between them when we're in attack. When it switches to the 4-4-2 defensive shape, Pulisic essentially alongside Zardes, McKennie probably alongside Bradley or Trapp. This all makes sense. This all fits in. And it also means if we win the ball and counter-attack, Pulisic is already pretty far forward. He's leading a counter.
Yeah.
Right? This could work.
Here is a massive wrinkle that we haven't talked about that I feel like we should at this point.
Oh, there's a guy that hates when you say wrinkle, so I hope he's tweeted a bunch.
Okay. Here's a massive...
wrinkle.
I don't even know what else to say. A monkey wrench. We'll throw it that way. What happens if they don't go with the shape that we saw against January? Because this entire conversation has been sort of predicated on the idea that this worked against January, it worked in January, and we liked what we saw. So maybe you adapted a little bit, you adjusted a little bit, but it's the same basic thing. If they come out in a back 3, if it's a 3-4-3 or a 4-2-3-1, like are we frustrated with Berhalter at that point because it is suddenly a wholesale change?
No, if the style of play is the same.
Okay.
Right? So if the shape is slightly different, we got into this on a recent show, right? But if the goal is still make sure we've got guys wide, We've got attacking midfielders coming through the middle. The idea is that we have possession and we attempt to just get you off balance and create spaces for people to pop through and make chances. I think it works. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm okay with that.
But I'm reasonably confident, in a way that I wasn't after the Panama game, that the shape and the style of play, the system and the style are kind of going hand in hand at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then let's go back to a combination of the wide attackers in the midfield, because we should probably talk omissions there. We've talked about a lot of omissions up front. Moving to, say, those wide attackers, you mentioned Timothy Weah, U23 eligible, so that one makes a bit more sense. Jonathan Amon is one that I think a lot of people would have liked to have seen, or maybe some people were frustrated not to see. Julian Green, maybe less so, but has been in consideration for the national team, was playing under Dave Sarachan, so maybe some expectation that he would be included here, not on the roster.
I mean, Julian Green, I would argue, is a player who you could watch him play, see what he contributes to a game, see what Gregg Berhalter likes, and you can easily say that's not a Gregg Berhalter possession style player, right? Julian Green's passing is it's not terrible, but it's not wonderful. His decision making in terms of he just loves to go for goal, right? Julian Green will shoot a lot when you sort of, it's not necessarily the best idea. He's kind of direct, and that can be really useful. For another coach, it's perfect. For Gregg Berhalter, it's not perfect, right? So this is maybe one of those things where the system comes first, and it means that Julian Green's style of play doesn't fit. Doesn't mean he's a bad footballer. If Julian Green's dad is listening, it doesn't mean your son's a bad footballer. It means it maybe just doesn't fit this system.
It means, I mean, look at how he was utilized under Dave Sarachan and how I think he looked good under Dave Sarachan. You go back to the France game, I think, is when he got the kind of fluke goal, but a goal nonetheless.
He's got like number 10 striker type deal.
But that did feel a bit more to me like the Jose Mourinho approach of attackers just do stuff, and I hope it works, and defense, that's what we're going to focus on. And so, I think if you're giving him free reign to try stuff and shoot from distance and go for a through ball here and a through ball there, maybe that makes more sense. But if you're Gregg Berhalter and you're going for a more comprehensive possession style, we keep possession, we put them under pressure, we cause problems, I don't know if he fits that system as much. So again, that omission, slightly more explainable. Jonathan Amon, I think maybe it's just a chance of Berhalter hasn't had a chance to see him as much, or maybe he just doesn't quite fit in yet. What were you going to say?
Also age eligible.
You
could see him on a U20 roster. You could see him on a U23 roster. There are a lot of talented young guys who we may just be pushing towards U20s because the U20 World Cup is coming in May. It's March. U20 World Cup is coming in May. Or you may be pushing them towards U23 Olympic qualifying, which again, we've failed the last two times. We have to get it right this time. I don't know. I don't think it's been officially scheduled. I think CONCACAF qualifying, U23 Olympic qualifying is like October 2019. The team doesn't exist right now. If we're going to start building the culture of a team, a couple games this March would be really, really useful. And sorry, quick tangent. The speculation, I haven't got any sources on this, but the speculation is that maybe Josh Wolf, assistant coach on the national team, worked under Berhalter at Columbus Crew, might run that U23 team, which means the U23 team could play the same style of play, which is, again, if Weah and Sargent end up playing a load of reps on that team, still useful to them because all the time spent there is spent learning the system, right? U23s play the same as the full team. All those minutes are valuable.
That's why the JV team should play the same style as the varsity team so the JV players can step right up and fill in when need be. There we go. All right, so that would be the wider attacking options. Then more centrally...
Or Pulisic just shifted out there, maybe 20 minutes at some point. We're like, all right, Christian Pulisic, go on, play left wing, play right wing, see what happens.
Lots of things are possible.
Are you better than Corey Baird?
It is not possible that Kellen Acosta will be playing because he was not included. That one makes more sense. He was excused from national team duty in January. There were a couple different reasons. There was a long statement from Gregg Berhalter about why.
Not quite fit enough, wasn't getting the system.
That's
I actually don't know what Acosta's start to the season with the Rapids has been like, but if you got cut from the original January camp, it's very unlikely you're going to be included in the March camp when Adams and McKennie are coming in. Fair?
So, I would say so. So then the other notable omissions there would be Georgi Mihailovic. We talked about him briefly. He's age eligible. It's also, again, if you look at the kind of the order of operations, like it makes sense that others are ahead of him in this regard because Christian Pulisic, I think, makes sense to start in that spot, and we want to see him. And there's a chance that Pulisic plays both of these games to give him the reps.
And worth noting, Christian Roldan, Sebastian Lletget, both performed really well in January. They're both on this roster. So it's really interesting to have the two guys that have learned the system and know the system, and then McKennie and Pulisic on top of them. I think it'll be fascinating sort of which combination of those players impresses in training and starts, right? In a weird way, Roldan and Lletget have seniority in terms of the system.
Yeah.
And it just maybe we'll see how quickly Pulisic and McKennie catch up.
Yeah.
Based on knowing how sharp those guys are, I'm going to guess pretty fast.
I guess they'll be but they'll be all right. I think McKennie's, I think they're both pretty competitive, I should say. So I think they'll want to be up and at him very quickly. So for Mihailovic, I think then, age eligible, so maybe he gets to play that same role with U23s and develop there. And then maybe it is also just not quite ready for prime time yet, but we're going to see if Pulisic and McKennie can do it, but you're still in the consideration.
There's literally a quote from Berhalter that's some guys did really well, but they're and we'll call them in the future, but for whatever reason, they're not in this camp, right? So don't worry about it. Mihailovic is good.
So then where are we on Darlington Nagbe?
I mean, it's not good for him that he's not on this roster, right? I thought he would be a Gregg Berhalter player because Berhalter likes to keep possession, move the ball, move it around, keep it going, smart passing. Darlington Nagbe, I would have thought is his type of player. There may be some reason why he's not. It may be that when you fall back into that 4-4-2, he's not as useful defensively as Weston McKennie. I
mean, I think again, if you look at the board as we have it, I don't see Darlington Nagbe being used if they're going with that same 4-3-3, but whatever it becomes. I don't see Jonathan Nagbe being a Michael Bradley Will Trapp, number 6. I don't see him supplanting Christian Pulisic or Sebastian Lletget or even playing the Georgi Mihailovic role. I don't think that suits him that well. So then you're looking at, does he beat out Weston McKennie? I don't think so. Does he beat out Christian Roldan, who looked good? He missed that one sitter in the January camp, but has been improving and improving and improving. And it might just be that, again, if you're Gregg Berhalter, you look at what you've got there. You want to evaluate the new players coming in, Weston McKennie, and then you want to see what the players from the first camp can do in this new camp, and you evaluate their progress accordingly. Then maybe there's just not room for Darlington Nagbe. And that's the only way to explain it away.
Yeah, and maybe in the future there's room for Darlington Nagbe, but it's also to Nagbe's detriment that he was preparing for Champions League with Atlanta in January because that game was in February. That was kind of the reason I assumed that Nagbe wasn't in that first camp, but then he's lacking the experience of camp, right? Which is what gives Roldan and Lletget the edge right now.
There you go.
Final thing I want to talk about is just Bradley and Trapp in
the midfield, because you still got to go defense.
In that defensive midfield role, Bradley and Trapp, there is a chance that Tyler Adams plays there.
True.
It's not impossible. I wouldn't be against it. So just worth floating that up there.
I wouldn't be against it if it feels, I don't know if this is going to make any sense, so I apologize, but if it feels like it is him, Gregg Berhalter, just trying different stuff. If we see, say Adams starts as that right back moving into central midfield, and he does that for the first 55 minutes, but then suddenly Michael Bradley subbed out and DeAndre Yedlin comes on, and Tyler Adams goes to that number 6 spot. I kind of like that idea of, okay, you've been doing this role, that seemed like it works, but now we want to see if you can do this role. I guess I don't like the idea of Adams sitting the bench for one game and then being the number 6 the next game, or playing as right back all one game and then maybe getting 5 minutes at the very end of a game as the number 8 or something like that. I hope it's a bit more balanced.
I wouldn't be against it. As long as he plays every minute of every game, I'm happy.
See, I had him playing 5 minutes in the second game. There we go. That's the difference.
Okay, to the back line.
Yeah.
We've already talked about Yedlin Lima. I think if Yedlin plays, we've already said this, right? But it'll be interesting to see if he can do the moving into midfield role. I think he's the least suited player to do that.
Yeah.
I think more likely is there is maybe a style change at some point. It's right, Yedlin, go bomb down that wing, right? Centre backs. Aaron Long stays. He's the holdover from January camp. For those who don't remember, he wore the captain's armband. It is a bromance between Gregg Berhalter and Aaron Long.
Yes.
Yeah?
And we think, grain of salt here, we think that that's probably why Walker Zimmerman not included, because Zimmerman looked very good in January. We enjoyed it. He's been playing.
Was excellent.
Has looked good for LA so far.
I saw LAFC versus Sporting KC. I did watch kind of casually, but I remember being impressed with Zimmerman.
I mean, I was impressed by his foresight to leave FC Dallas and thus not get megged by Efrain Alvarez. That was left to Matt Hedges to deal with. So I think it makes sense then that if you're going to sacrifice one of them, you keep Aaron Long.
Yes.
You bring in Matt Miazga and John Brooks.
That
all
sense.
makes total sense to me.
Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about him.
Omar Gonzalez.
Why is he here?
Made this roster. My only thought is that Gregg Berhalter was impressed by Omar Gonzalez when he saw him play Major League Soccer or has seen him play for Pachuca at some point. This is one that really doesn't, because we talk about players that fit the system, players that make sense. Omar Gonzalez does not pass out of the back particularly well, is not a particularly mobile centre-back. It's none of the things that fit a Gregg Berhalter system. Zimmerman can pass it, can break lines beautifully. Aaron Long can do the same. John Brooks definitely can do it. Matt Miazga can do it. Omar Gonzalez is the only one that can't do it. I thought he would never play for the US national team again. Because I just think he was not a Berhalter player. I'm shocked at this inclusion.
Okay, as am I. Here is my only attempt at like a silver lining explanation.
Yeah.
Is that it does tell us that Gregg Berhalter doesn't care. That he is not playing politics. I mean that sincerely. That like there's no way Dave Sarakin calls in Omar Gonzalez. There's no way. Because he knows what that's going to look like. He knows the metrics on that are terrible. The ghost of Trinidad past. He knows that Twitter's going to explode. And if you're Dave Sarakin and you maybe think possibly, maybe potentially, kind of there's a chance you're going to get that gig, you don't want to like annoy the fan base. Gregg Berhalter calling in Omar Gonzalez tells me that he doesn't care.
Yep.
That it's sort of, to him, it's going to be about the players that I want to see try to play my system. And I understand people might not like it on occasion, but I'm going to do what I want to do. And that's the best way that I can see to look at this because it really – I'm not even saying like I've watched Omar Gonzalez and he is a bad defender these days. He may be a lights out defender.
I don't know how he's doing in League MX. I know his team's not doing well.
It's just we know why we feel the way we do about him.
Yeah.
And it's hard to shake. And it is – if he comes in and plays great, that's great for him. I will still be a little bit like, yeah, but is he going to have one go off of his shin from 20 yards out? I'm a little bit nervous. We
could somewhat give him the benefit of the doubt and say maybe he looks better in a more organised and better system. Because we've seen John Brooks look awful against Costa Rica when the whole thing fell apart, right? We've seen Omar Gonzalez look awful against Trinidad when the whole thing fell apart. Maybe he does fit the Berhalter system and I just don't see it. Berhalter sees something I don't see. He did say his quotes were about like how he values veteran leadership and that is part of the reason why guys like Omar Gonzalez was called in.
We also, with these camps, January camp was like a good example of this. There's always a few guys who get called in who don't get any minutes at all.
Personality-wise?
Yeah, I think it was Marky Delgado, I think, didn't play at all. Like maybe wasn't even dressed for the second game in the January friendlies.
Just sitting there naked.
He had like the red training top, which is not the match day one. But I do wonder if maybe that's what this is like Omar will, obviously get minutes in practice and will be involved in a lot of the like 11v11 scrimmages that they'll inevitably have, but maybe is one that we don't see get any minutes, but Gregg Berhalter wants to just see how he fits in within the system.
Yeah.
That said, maybe we see him start alongside Aaron Long in the second game.
Who knows?
I would hope Gregg Berhalter does.
So big win for Aaron Long.
Yep.
Tim Reams included, I am convinced, as a sort of left-back/left centre-back because of the way that left-back role functions.
Talk about it for a second.
What, you want me to describe what happens?
Yeah, why would he fit there?
Because we start in a back four where the left back, you would think, oh, that's a normal left back.
Yep.
But as soon as the right back, Nick Lima last game, drifts into centre midfield, all those centre backs shuffle over a little bit, right? So your right centre back becomes very much like right of centre back. Yep. Your left centre back becomes an actual middle centre back, like Connor Cody for Wolves. And your left back.
What a good one for everyone to understand.
You saw if you watched the Chelsea game, you saw a lot of him playing centre back. Right. And then your left back never really overlaps, goes forward, as we mentioned, why Anthony Robinson doesn't fit. Your left back comes and plays left centre back.
Yep.
Hold position, distribute the ball, all that kind of stuff. Lovitz did it great or very competently against Panama and Costa Rica. I'd be interested to see Tim Ream do it. I'm also sort of interested in Aaron Long doing it, even though he's right-footed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, so we may see that. There's a few outliers, but I think, I would expect Lovitz starting that first game just because he has the experience under Berhalter.
Any other centre-back omissions? Cameron Carter-Vickers.
Yes, Cameron Carter-Vickers is, in terms of defenders, Cameron Carter-Vickers is one of the, there's one more big one.
Yeah.
But we expect that's because of his passing ability or
you would think so, but
lack thereof.
But here's Omar.
No,
here's Darth Vader.
Yeah, but again, if you're sticking with Aaron Long because of what he did in January, and he did captain the team, you want to see Miazga and Brooks play together again because Berhalter hasn't gotten to see that as coach yet. And then maybe you're taking a gamble on Omar Gonzalez. Then Cameron Carter-Vickers is already kind of a gamble. So maybe you gamble a different way, knowing that you could then call Cameron Carter-Vickers in whenever you need to.
There we go.
So the other defender that I would say is a bit of an omission for me because I fully expected him to be in this roster.
Oh, you're too kind. I haven't been well lately anyway, so I'm not really ready.
It was going to be you, actually. Yeah. I just don't know. It's Fabian Johnson. Fabian Johnson is the one who we know Berhalter went and saw Gladbach play. I think it was like Gladbach Wolfsburg. So there was, I can't remember if it was that one, but it was another one like that where there was like it could have been to see John Brooks and also Fabian Johnson. Or it could have been to see,
and we watched like highlights of all Johnson's involvements.
Yeah,
right?
and so.
And he did well.
He did. And that's why I'm surprised that he's not here. Because it seemed like he would be tailor-made for this kind of fullback into central midfield role or into a more attacking role. And instead, he is not included. And maybe that's because of what we've already talked about, that Lima can do the job. It's the quote-unquote Nick Lima role. cue angry Twitter.
Yep.
But then Yedlin maybe gets a look, maybe Adams gets a look. Maybe it is another case of there's just
you only get to pick 24 players.
There's not a lot of depth there.
I did read a quote of I talked to Fabian Johnson and told him
there is a lot of depth there, and thus there's no extra spot there.
And there's only like so many there's only so many opportunities.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? You throw Johnson in, suddenly there's too many faces for the spots. Yeah. He did say that he talked to Fabian Johnson and the door is always open. So, yeah, it's an omission.
I think the door is often open for Fabian Johnson.
Yeah. But same as Bobby Wood, right?
Yep.
Like, not this time, maybe in the future, right? So this isn't a World Cup roster. We don't need to freak out about who's in and who's out because it's not final, right? It's just this time round.
I mean, this is kind of what we do. This is kind of what we do. We freak out about
Although
things.
it is sort of final for the Gold Cup, right? Because Berhalter's talked about, like, we'll know a lot more about the Gold Cup roster after this. If you're bringing Fabian Johnson in May for the pre-Gold Cup stuff, I'm saying it's unlikely.
I would say the things that we thought might be a gamble, like trying Fabian Johnson and seeing if it fits, that hasn't happened this time. To me, says it doesn't happen until after the Gold Cup, if at all.
Yeah.
So that's all the
CONCACAF Nations League.
That could also be the case. So that's all the outfield players. Then there was a little bit of consternation around the goalkeeper situation because you've got
Zach Steffen.
Zach Steffen, obviously.
Let me guess. Ethan Horvath.
You got it.
And the third guy is Sean Johnson.
Correct.
Yes.
Sean Johnson, who did get minutes, subbed on, I believe, against Panama in January, so has, again, experience under Berhalter, has been there before. Ethan Horvath, European-based goalkeeper, so he was not eligible to play or was not able to play in January, so maybe you want to give him a look in camp. But that means that you're leaving out Bill Hamid and Brad Guzan.
Yep.
I'm assuming that's not because they're feuding, sort of, but I think it probably is because, similar to Nagby for Guzan, that he missed out on that January camp because of the late run in MLS Cup, plus preparing for CONCACAF Champions League.
We think that's the reason?
We think, but his distribution was decent enough that it makes sense for him to be in there. Bill Hamid, I'm not quite sure on, except that maybe if you're Gregg Berhalter and you think Steffen is my one, then I liked what I saw from Sean Johnson in camp, so I want to keep him around. I want to give Ethan Horvath the chance because this is the time to do so. Then maybe it just means that Bill Hamid loses out, that maybe he's 4th or 5th in the depth chart.
I think he is. Yeah, and then Brad Guzan, I'd love to know the conversation between Berhalter and Guzan. It may be that he's been told, hey, it's next generation time.
Yeah.
It may be that.
It's a possibility.
It's a shame, but that could be what's happening.
Yeah. So there are a few lingering question marks that I think is what makes me slightly uncertain about this roster, that there's players like Nagby, where we think we have an explanation, but we're not sure. Guzan, we think we have an explanation, but we're not sure. A few other ones like that.
Bobby Wood is the huge snub on this roster.
Absolutely.
Is Bobby Wood. Unless there's some injury we don't know about, the huge snub on this roster is Bobby Wood.
It is, but at the same time, it's not a snub. That's the thing. Like, I have but I have a reaction to you saying it's a snub because I'm like, yeah, but I kind of get it. So it's like, it's not this like, oh, he's tearing up the Bundesliga and he hasn't gotten consideration.
Let's say the telling omission.
There it is.
Right?
Yeah. So there are a few of those which I think does make me slightly more, not concerned, but just like I have questions about this roster in a way that I didn't think I would coming out of the winter camp. So that's why I think I am a little bit more apprehensive about it, which I think is why you're seeing, or partially explains maybe why there's more of a negative reaction on Twitter, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I am the one that dictates how Twitter reacts.
I will say, I would like us as a show maybe to stop putting so much stock in Twitter reaction because it's almost like a self-selecting group of people who are loud as soon as they see the roster and immediately almost always have a negative reaction unless it's just like shiny things and it's all like young exciting players. You know what I'm saying?
Shiny things?
Yeah. I'm not saying, obviously not everybody on Twitter. There are some like really insightful, intelligent people on Twitter, but the loudest voices are not always the smartest voices, and it tends to drown out the more nuanced thought.
So what I'm hearing you say then, I believe I've got this, is that you're saying wrap Omar Gonzalez in aluminum foil, he'll look shiny, Twitter will be on board?
I mean, I don't think people are that easy to fool.
Okay, fine. Put him in his Darth Vader suit that he was in when he was announced by whomever it was? Okay.
You do understand what I'm saying, though?
I do.
Yeah. Maybe it is better to think about this as the process of Gregg Berhalter building his system and look at it from that angle instead of like, which players am I excited about in the highlights that I've seen.
That makes sense to me. That makes sense to me.
One final name we didn't talk about, who actually doesn't fall into either of the categories I just mentioned.
How is there a player we haven't talked about?
He plays for Derby County.
Oh, okay. Dwayne Holmes?
Dwayne Holmes has looked, from what I've seen, again, I'm guilty of this here. I've seen mostly highlights. I think I've maybe seen one Derby County game this year. He's sort of been playing one of those like Pulisic, McKennie, like attacking midfielder roles, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how close he was to getting a call for this. But I kind of understand that you only get 24 players. Roldan and Lletget have already done it. Pulisic and McKennie are coming in. Even though Holmes has looked impressive for Derby and has really been good at creating chances from what I've seen, there's just not room.
Yeah.
There's just not room.
There you go.
Yeah.
So we shall see. Maybe we keep an eye on some of those younger players like an Eamon, like Dwayne Holmes, and we see if maybe we feel like they should get more looks. There's also an argument to be made, potentially, that if this doesn't work, if the shape doesn't work that well...
Like Ecuador and Chile smoke us?
Yeah. Then the question is like...
Excuse me, Chile.
I know what you meant. But if we look at this roster for a second, and like a lot of our justification for like why you don't bring in Dwayne Holmes or why you don't bring in Darlington Nagbe is because you've got depth in all the midfield spots. But if you have less depth in your attacking spots, then maybe the question is like
fewer depths,
there we
fewer
go.
deeps.
I knew you were going to do it. Then the question is like, well, then should we be bringing in those wingers? Should we change the system to like a 4-4-2 diamond, and we've just got a bunch of central midfielders narrow, since that seems to be where our depth is. But I will withhold that sort of concern and judgment until after we see these friendlies.
Oh, I'm so glad we answered that future frustrations question.
I mean, hey,
of Gregg
it's
Berhalter.
important to do.
Yeah,
it's important to do.
Okay, the final thing I want to say is we've mentioned a few times.
How is there more to say?
Weah and Sargent and Mihailovic and Cannon. It might be that they're in the U23 roster. This is one of those classic US soccer things where the games aren't arranged yet. They're probably being hastily arranged. They might be in Europe. The news was broken by Nak.
I feel like you actually are doing a very good impression of US soccer right now. Are they? Maybe they're in Europe? Yeah, sure. Why not?
Nak Breda, Eric Palmer Brown's team, announced that he'd been called up to the US U23 team.
Right.
And I think they said somewhere in the story, I think they said that the friendlies would be in Europe.
Okay.
It's just worth knowing that this might be good for us because we love covering US teams. There's probably going to be a U23 roster to talk about.
Yeah.
And there's going to be 2 U23 games to watch. Maybe next week, because that's the international break, right?
Let's just hope we have the time delay to make it happen.
The week of the 21st and the 26th.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we're going to get to start thinking about Olympic qualifying and who's on that U23 team. And, Tim Weah looks good. All that could be coming in the very near future.
That could be coming in the very near future.
I'm just priming the pump.
I know
priming
you are,
the pump. All right. So our very quick roster breakdown that I think I guessed would take us 25 minutes.
You did.
Is an hour long.
Yep.
Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy. Listeners,
thank you for listening, and we will talk to you again probably later today after the Champions League.